anyone see me? Because YouTube doesn't. Oh, now YouTube can see me. Good, good. So, hello there. We're gonna talk today about Phalanx. What was Phalanx? How they fought, and well, you may think it redundant because well, a line of men armed with pointy sticks and sticking them out in general direction of the enemy was probably the oldest military formation in the book, and in fact, it was the oldest military formation we know of. That is, ancient Sumerians used it. Some line of men with some spears sticking in the general direction of the enemy was around 2,500 years ago. Ancient Assyrians used formations of spearmen in conjunction with archers. Ancient Babylonian copied them, and basically ancient warfare, as we know of this ancient warfare, up until the Greek city-states was using some kind of spearmen mixed with archers formation, and they were experimenting how much spearmen, how much archers, and we don't know a lot about their conduct on the battlefield. We can guess, we can speculate about given that we know their armament to an extent and the terrain they were fighting on. And well, from some descriptions of the ancient battles, but they are, very stingy about with the details. So we don't know exactly how these ancient formations of spearmen fought. We know more about the phalanx. That's why, hence, I will talk about phalanx today. And phalanx arrived about between 800 and 600 before Christ. In Greece, most concrete in Peloponnesian Peninsula. Spartans are often given the credit of inventing phalanx. I am not sure, and I will not tell that was Spartans if I'm not sure. I think it is more like Spartans' neighbors invented the shield because believe it or not, but you should believe me, the shield was most important part of their equipment, of the ancient hoplite equipment. The shield was called aspis. Later it is known as hoplon. It was large round shield about a meter in diameter, and it was large enough so you hold it with your right hand. On the center of the shield you have this leather straps. You hold the shield like that in the center of the shield's mass, so you have the whole shield. Like if you held your arm around your waist, the shield was almost to your chin, and the shield was very impractical in anything other than hoplite type of fighting, than in phalanx type of formation, because it was so heavy. It was between 15 and 20 kilograms, and so if you would be a hoplite without your pals fighting like a duel with some other enemy soldier, this shield would probably slow you down. It is cumbersome, it is large, yes, it protects you very well. It is like a wood with a wrapping of copper on it. However, now I will check my filters because there are some maybe then will be better. Yes, better, cool. So hoplite sheet was most important, but it was useless when you were not in phalanx. And so why they fought in phalanx in the first place? Were they had some influences from the Middle East, from the from Persians, and from times before Persians. It was the, I think, easiest military formation because spear is also the relatively very easy to produce weapon, and so most of your soldiers, they don't necessarily had swords, but they had spears. They didn't necessarily had armor, but they can invest at least in shield. And when the Greek city-states show up to fight, it's actually important that we talk about war a little bit, how these city-states conducted war, because it was not a total type of war as Romans did it afterwards. Romans fought to the total victory. Like they often fought the wars of annihilation. They were destroying their enemies. They were not only conquering their territory, they were subjugating it by the whole. Greeks rarely do that. Greek city-state wars, like when the Greeks fight between them, were when you compare them to the Roman conquest, they almost look like a sporting events. They almost look like a sporting events. You have the guys from one city put together, and they go to the field of battle, and it was not like they met randomly on the march and there we go at it. No, they met each other, they camped, and they sent delegation to like, okay, do we fight here or there? Maybe we should mix things up. Maybe this is the wrong terrain, the wrong type of terrain for phalanx style combat. So they looked for a nice flat field to conduct their battle maneuvers and their battle. And after the battle was end, you shouldn't necessarily have a lot of victims from that battle. Some of them, yes, mostly on the side of the loser who broke formation and fled. But after this kind of battle, sometimes there was no next battle. Like it was one time, sometimes when the two small city-states fought with each other, and maybe the political situation inside those cities was not was not in favor of war so much. After they clashed and one side fled, it could very well mean the end of the war, with not so many casualties as you would think the war should have after the war drags on. And sometimes the victorious side of the victorious phalanx, sometimes they, rarely, but sometimes they didn't have a man dead. Sometimes one, sometimes two men dead and few wounded, while the losing phalanx had losses maybe in dozens or in hundreds, especially when they were chased, pursued after the battle by the cavalry and light troops. But after this, after this breakthrough, phalanx basically stopped fighting, because you have this cumbersome shield, you have this whole formation of square that can move short distances but not very fast. Phalangites or hoplites basically stopped fighting after that. There were only the killing the wounded enemies or helping wounded enemies if you recognize somebody, because sometimes they fought often, Greek city-states between them. Sometimes there were periods they fought every year. They had some campaign every year or every second year that the armed men from your neighborhood gathered and they go out, fight somebody. Some of these people had extensive military service behind their belts, and that doesn't mean that make them very good soldiers though, because often they didn't train between the campaigns. But the war is the best kind of training. Some of these hoplites were very much trained. And so why phalanx? Why this shield? Why this shield was so important? As I said, well, it was large enough so it will hold in this shield on your right, on your left arm. Then it is like partially protects you, leaving your right hand open for spear thrusting or sword thrusting if you lost your spears, but spear is more important. Even if you lost the pointy end of your spear and you had like the shorter spear with only broken sticks, broken part of stick at the end, and then they even could fight with that, because some moves in the phalanx were about pushing the other enemy to disrupt their formation. There were like these repeated pushes sometimes. There was a command from a commander like to push. I don't remember how it was called because I don't know ancient Greek. Like I know a few words only. how it was called, Dorastismos. Dorastismos was some guy called Dorastismos, and the all guys in the formation started pushing their spears or their broken spears just to disrupt the enemy formation, and the part of the shield, because so yes, you have right hand for pushing your spears. The spear was between 2 and 3 meters long, like 2.5, 2.8, something about that. Most spears were, and so you could use it in one hand, and your left was to use your shield to protect yourself and to protect the guy on the left of you, because shield is big. Shield covers you here and covers part here. So during combat, Phalanx had these few stances. Like the first stand when they were going to the enemy, before the contact with the enemy, the files or rows like this, the space between the fighters in the files was like up to 2.5 meters even. When they were in the initial contact, or they could tighten their formation, they were still about 40-30 centimeters between the fighters. But when they were pushing, when they were during in heavy contact with the enemy, fighting, they reduced the spaces between the files of the soldiers, and they were usually going to the right with that, because there is the shield of your mate from your right, so you try to hide your right side of the body behind his shield. It was also very important to Greeks because it was reinforcing their usual attitude about politics of the city, like about your political ideology, because a lot of city-states had some kind of democracy, had some, maybe not most, but many. And even if they didn't have some kind of democracy, if they had a king, often enough, this esprit de corps that was born, that every man not only defending himself but also his mate to the left, was very important to this republican thinking Greeks, but also to the monarchic thinking Greeks. Just that this monarchic thinking Greeks were also wanted to win the battle, right? So they put an emphasis on tight formation. The phalanx had to be impregnable to be a good phalanx from the front, at least, and due to that people were going often more to the right with their during the fighting, because they wanted to hide on the right side with under your mate's shield. So phalanx during the fighting, during the pushing, had tend to slide to the right a little bit. Like you have these two phalanx and each one goes to the right, and sometimes so the quite early battle tactics of the phalanx was to then use that move, use that momentum that pushes your soldiers to the right, so you can then envelop the flank, your right flank, so this is the left flank of the enemy. And if you do that, and the enemy couldn't do that for some reason, maybe because your line was a little longer, maybe because you had your light troops there to protect your flank. If the flank of the phalanx is enveloped, is basically beginning of an end for the phalanx, because in this tight formation, when they were pushing against each other, it is very difficult to then you have not much space to turn actually, and to have a room for your right hand to spear, and you have to turn to your right to do that. Dangerous. So phalanx had to be protected, and the Greeks very much knew about it. They had light troops, they had cavalry. They were not very cavalry oriented people, and but the light troops, the peltasts, that is, troops armed with only light armor or no armor at all, only small shield, so-called pelta, with the javelins and daggers or short swords. They were often protecting the sides of the phalanx. At least when we are talking about the early period of phalanx, and we'll get later. So your phalanx had the tendency to drift to the right, to the right side to hide under the shield of the mate from the right. So usually, what Greeks commanders did were to put the most disciplined troops, the best hoplites that they had on the right flank, partially to stem this right movement, and then maybe the enemy phalanx, if they are not led so well, maybe they can move, so then your phalanx can go and attack them from the right side, or maybe not even phalanx will just bend, but the peltasts will go around, or cavalry will go around. Now this that being said, well, not about tactics, but we don't exactly know how phalanx fought, or how they behave in contact with the enemy. And there are basically two hypotheses. One, it was like more than a thrusting and sometimes pushing contest, but it was more tactical, that sometimes this no man's land was kind of spaced for a meter or a meter and a half, so people can lash in front of it. Maybe you had some hero, maybe some commander, and maybe how they fought. Sometimes, however, they clashed and they pushed, and some historians determined that it was mostly pushing, that phalanx was mostly a pushing contest. That's why you don't have that many casualties. But well, I have a few questions about that, because if it is the pushing contest, why don't you put your phalanx in more files, in more rows, in more ranks? So you have more pushing power on that side. If you have more people, like here you have 12 ranks, and you are attacking 4 phalanx of 4 ranks deep, then this 12 ranks should easily push them away. But that didn't happen that often. That it should happen after a few minutes of fighting, almost immediately. But we know battles lasted for hours. So I think it was sometimes a mix of the two. I think they were trying to, there was maybe the initial clash when they were taking momentum, they were going at light pace, or marching to not disrupt their formations, one of the two. Sometimes they ran. We had during the Battle of the Marathon, when the Greeks fought Persians for the first time in mainland Greece, they ran to hit the Persians, to make the contact quick, possibly because they didn't want to suffer too much from enemy archers. Persians were famous archers, they had a lot of archers in Marathon battle, so that was probably, I think, the move that the Greeks made, just run them on the beach and attack them. Later, when there were people talking years later about that battle, they would say that we ran, and everybody listening would knew about what they were saying, because this charge was kind of famous. So maybe it was kind of famous because they didn't close in usually in full sprint or in light pace. They were maybe more marching, and last few like a dozen meter was like, oh, let's go charge them. This way, yes, you can also lose your formation, but maybe not to that much of an extent. Maybe it is not that important. And by the way, I didn't open my beer yet. What the hell? I just started talking about the phalanx. We have Pinta. We have Polish beer, Pinta. This is the first aid. It would translated first aid. It is light pills, and I heard it's good. We'll see about that. However, phalanx was usually arranged 4 to 8 ranks of men deep. Sometimes, however, later they were experimenting with more ranks of phalanx in the phalanx. Do you know, to have the pushing power or staying power if you are pushed by another phalanx, especially later, and the Greek commander Epidamnos or Epidamnos, I think you can find him also. He was Boeotian leader as strategos autokrator, which means the commander of the army. He was also he was much more than a military. He was a very influential politician and a Theban statesman. We are talking about him now, however, because he started to experimenting with more ranks of soldiers and with uneven or asymmetric military formation. That is, to put a large force on your flank. He usually used left flank. Why? Well, because usually Greeks put the best soldiers on the right flank. So Epidamnos was like, I will switch things. I will put my best hoplites to the left, so they can devastate whatever you have on your right. And he used it on the during the Battle of Leuctra, when he defeated Spartans with his allies. Spartans had more men, while Epidamnos arranged his men not only like in 50 ranks, like Spartans had 8 ranks from left to the right, while the Thebans and Epidamnos put like 50 ranks on the left flank, 50 ranks of men on the left flank, and only 4 ranks in the center and on the right flank. And also it was in an echelon. They were more the right flank was more to the back, and center was gradually more to the back than the left flank. Left flank was pushing power, left flank was attacking first. And during the Battle of Leuctra, this Epidamnos' left flank attacked the Spartans themselves. There were a few hundred Spartiates, that are like, the citizens of Sparta, true citizens of Sparta, true soldiers, professional soldiers of Sparta, not just Spartans as living in Sparta, because as you probably know, Spartans had only like a small percentage of their residents were actually citizens. Most of them were slaves or just little thing more than slaves, and second category citizens. Not citizens actually, so second category people. And he crushed then Spartans right with this kind of maneuver. And during his time, during Epidamnos' time in Thebans, there was some other guy who was a prisoner in Thebes, and this guy was named Philip. You will meet him later in history under Philip II, I think he deserves the title Philip the Great, but his son took that, Alexander the Great, already. So he was a young hostage, like political hostage, so he was basically a guest. and he was learning there, and he learned a lot from Epidamnos from when he returned to Macedonia, Philip guy. He was acclaimed king by the Macedonian nobles and mostly Macedonian army. He started to implement new things. Macedonians always had good cavalry. He made them companions. He made them elevated in their state as soldiers. Before that, they were they were nobility, but they were considered like the most. They were considered in Macedonia the most important military power, horsemen, and infantry was like rise to their level as well, and they used and well, it was another kind of hoplite. The Philip of Macedon made his phalanx very deep, deeper, up to 16 or 33, 32 ranks of men. Usually 16, so two times what usually Greeks had in their phalanx, and and he gave them much longer spears. Sarissas were like two times long than usual Greek spear. They were like about 5.5 meters long, and this kind of long spears were impossible to hold in one arm. The phalangites of Philip of Macedon used two arms to use your spears like that, and they had smaller shield. Some sources called this shield pelta. It was the same shield as peltas the light troops used. Some historians disagree with that and point out they were similar in size, but in fact a little longer than the pelta shield. It was because they still had like this shield here, but it should end right about here, so it couldn't be very large, because you need to this hand to hold your spear, and they were drilled incessantly. They were drilled every day. They were like professional soldiers. For the first few years, the Philip paid them only for training, and they paid them like it would be a wartime. So they loved him, and they could perform brilliant maneuvers on the battlefield that were before Macedons only Spartans could perform that well on the battlefield, and handful of other city-state military formation that were composed of more professional soldiers that were trained also every day or almost every day in war and maneuvers. Spartans could do that for a long time, and this is one of the reasons why Spartans are considered the best warriors of ancient Greece. Well, because they were the only people that were professional fighters. Probably they not like before Spartans became so much into the wars and trained incessantly day by day. There was this match of the phalanx of I think 200 or 100 men from Sparta and 200 or 100 men from Argos, and they had this sporting clash between them to decide who is the better warrior, and almost like a sporting event, and the last man standing was 2 men from Argos and 1 man from Greece, and they call it a draw by that time, probably. Not quite sure about the details of this, but this match outside of war did happen actually. So a lot of men from Argos probably wanted to test their skin about in the fighting with Spartans. Anyway, this Philip changed this phalanx, and it was more a stationary formation. Greeks used phalanx, tried to use phalanx offensively, but in a crude sort of manner. These two lines meet. This one side they are pushing each other, or they are fighting. They are maybe flanking. But there was a little room for cavalry and light troops on this battle plan up until the enemy phalanx is broken, and Macedonians used their phalanx more offensively or passive in a kind of passive offensive manner. They were to go into contact with the enemy and hold the enemy in place while cavalry is maneuvering. So in fact the Macedonian infantry was not the arm of decision on the battlefield, but the cavalry was the arm of decision on the battlefield. And they called it hammer and anvil tactics. So the line of phalangites will keep enemy in place, in contact, fighting, and while the cavalry goes around, attack flanks, attack the rear. Alexander was often, even with his father alive, Alexander was often given to command the cavalry to search for this gap in the line, to search for the place to charge in and defeat the enemy and to make and to change the course of the battle. He did that every time with fighting Persians. Later, he was commanding his cavalry, and he was going around the battlefield, searching and to probing enemy and charging the enemy and killing the enemy. So Macedonians switched to the cavalry was the arm of decision in their battles, more than in Greek phalanx and phalangites. Phalanx formation of Macedonians is so interesting sometimes, because they had these maneuvers on the battlefield, like to tighten the formation, to widen the formation, to change the face of the formation to the sides or to the rear. They did that very well. In fact, there is one story of them performing their kind of maneuvers as a training, and they did it so well that some of the enemy were around them. The Macedonians were encircled actually in the valley. That was early part of Alexander's rule as a king, like his first year, and he got into the trap. So basically he was trapped inside the valley, whilst the walls of the valley was with enemy soldiers around him, and with only small very narrow road of exit. So he started to drill his men inside this valley, and some of the enemies that were looking from the mountains were like, we're not gonna fight them. Nope, we're gonna go home. And they went, half of them went home. Seriously. Half of them decided we don't want to fight them. They were like gods. They never seen enemy Greek phalanx, because they were more Illyrians, more like barbarians. They didn't fight in so coherent phalanx anyways, but they fought phalanx before. They fought Greeks before, and they knew that on uneven terrain like mountains, right there, they were on the mountains. They wanted the Greeks to come to them, and when they saw Macedonian phalanx performing wonders with this drill, they decided, nope, we're not gonna fight that phalanx. Also a few things about Macedonian phalanx, because I love them. They had these long spears, right? So how they defend from missiles? They should be a tight formation, right? Well, they could a little bit wide their front, but then they are vulnerable to attack from the front. They wanted to have the front pushed together, to have this line of spears stinging in the face of the enemy. 4 or up to 5 up front, the first rank of men. There was the first piece, the first stinky end of spear was 5 meters in front, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1 meter, or maybe a little closer to that, and they, when they were protecting themselves from the missiles, like arrows, they put their spears like that. So this little shield they had was they could put it over their head, and they were doing like this with their spears. And one rank was going that, so the other rank behind them go that, and you have 16 ranks of men doing something like that with their spears. And additionally, they had helmets, and they had these shields raised above their heads. So the actual losses the Macedonian phalanx took from missile fire was very little, and they fought Persians. They often had to face enemy shooting a lot of arrows at them, and additionally, when they were so well drilled, so they actually know their place in the formation, the constant time. They and you know this the littlest like organizational piece of the phalanx was the file of men. So this is the ranks, like first rank in front of the enemy, second rank, third rank, and these are files. People going like that. One file of Macedonian so 8 to 16 men, like 8 in standard Greek phalanx, 16 in Macedonian phalanx, was like the single unit. They fought together, they marched together, they eat together, so on. And they if they were drilled day by day in the same file of men, with the same file of men here and same file of men here, they could, like, you know, I think they had this, you know, spots where to put your spear, a little bit to the up, a little bit to the down, because like you have a very little when they were close knit together in the fighting formation. You had very little place to, you know, to jab your spears. If you're a first rank, yeah, you have all the space you need. The guys behind you, not that much. They had they had to, you know, find these little spears between elbow and the hip, or between the elbow and the head, and to, you know, to thrust there. They need training to do that well, to not only to not be of any detriment to the guys in front of them, but to be to the help of them, to the guys in front of them. So after this training that Philip made them go, Macedonian phalangites, foot companions, as they were called, because companions were usually the cavalry. So their status in Macedon was raised. There were foot companions, so called. So you are as much important. Some of them actually didn't have like this long sarissa spears. The best infantry Macedonians had was fighting more traditional Greek style, or at least when it comes to an armament, they had large aspis shields. They had short spears like this 2.5 meter, and swords, and they were used kind of as a special forces. Whenever you have Alexander attack infantry from the flank, it's usually these guys, hoplites, attacking from the flank. They were armed as hoplites, but they were trained in protecting the flanks of the phalangites in the main battle line. Additionally, that their flanks, outer flanks, were protected additionally by peltasts. Also, the thing about Macedonian cavalry, it was not strictly heavy infantry. Macedonian phalanx of like one lokos was few hundred men or more. I don't remember these Greek works. Sorry. Anyhow, they had all same heavy infantry in the Greek line, and the Macedonian line could have like around this phalanx formation. There were more light troops. The light troops were part of the unit, of the military unit. They were not used, or sometimes they were used independently from the main battle line, but they were to keep close during marching, during or during encounter battle. This, and every square of phalangites had his own peltasts to protect the flanks. Sometimes they even mixed cavalry in, especially later when the Alexander fought in the eastern extents of Persian Empire, Afghanistan and such. He used cavalry in between, like cavalry patrols, and light troops went on the patrol and as one military unit together. to you know to when they find the enemy, they were to cooperate. So what about our beer today? What's an hour? How long is gonna do? Oh, that's long. Okay. We just broke half an hour. There is like 40 minutes, so it will be all about this kind of phalanx fighting. I hope you love it. Give me thumbs up. And this beer, kind of light pills, very, very good. Yeah, I like it. Yep, 3.5 at least. So give me thumbs up. Remember to support me on Patreon, subscribe and all that, and I see you next week. And by the way, I was planning to make a show on the last Wednesday. Well, Wednesdays will be no good, but if I fix my computer, I will. When I fix my computer, I will be making streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I think, additionally to the Sunday show, and I think I will keep Sunday show a little longer, while the Tuesday and Thursday shows will be shorter, up to 20 minutes. Right now, well, I was thinking I will make half an hour today at most, but no, it's 40 minutes, so it's all for now. Take care, folks.